A child spits into a sink. White foam swirls down the drain, laced with a color no forest, no cave, no riverbank has ever produced. Mint. Manufactured mint. A flavor invented to convince a mouth that it is clean. This happens twice a day, in billions of bathrooms, without a single person questioning it. But somewhere, underground, sealed in limestone for 40,000 years, there is a skull. And in that skull, there are teeth. Worn, yellowed, chipped from cracking bone, and yet intact. No decay, no collapse, no root canal waiting to happen. No toothpaste ever touched them. Most people assume ancient humans had terrible teeth, rotting, falling out, a mouth full of disease, because they didn't have brushes, didn't have fluoride, didn't have dentists. That is not what the skeletal record shows. For most of human history, cavities were rare. In some prehistoric populations, less than 2% of teeth show decay. Compare that to modern industrial populations, where the number climbs past 90%.
Something changed, and it wasn't hygiene, it was hunger. To understand a mouth, you have to understand what it was built to survive. 40,000 years ago, teeth were tools before they were symbols of health. They pulled sinew from bone. They cracked open shells. They gripped hide while hands worked a blade. A tooth back then was under mechanical assault daily, grinding fibrous roots, tearing raw meat, crushing seeds coated in grit and dust from wild processing. You would expect that kind of abuse to destroy a mouth. Instead, it preserved it. Because the enemy of teeth was never grinding. It was never toughness. The enemy of teeth is something smaller, quieter, and far more patient. Something that doesn't attack enamel with force, but with time and sugar and stillness. Bacteria don't devour teeth directly. They feed on sugar left behind, and in feeding, they excrete acid. That acid, sitting undisturbed on a tooth surface, slowly dissolves it from the outside in. Ancient mouths simply never gave that process the conditions it needed. Consider the diet. No refined sugar. No fruit juice concentrated into syrup. No bread that dissolves into sticky glucose within seconds of chewing. Early human food was fibrous, coarse, and slow to break down. Root vegetables, wild tubers, lean game, unprocessed nuts, seasonal fruit eaten whole, skin and fiber included. That fiber did something modern food rarely does anymore. It scraped. Every bite of raw, coarse, unprocessed food acted like a natural abrasive, physically wearing away the soft biofilm that forms on teeth. Chewing wasn't just nutrition, it was maintenance. The mouth cleaned itself, meal by meal, through the very texture of what it consumed. There is something almost unsettling in that realization. The forest fed you and cleaned you in the same motion. Civilization broke that agreement. Now, picture the shift. Somewhere around 10,000 years ago, agriculture began reshaping human life. Grain, stored food, carbohydrates in far greater volume than the body had ever processed before. This was framed for centuries as humanity's great leap forward: stability, surplus, civilization. But something else happened at the same time, buried quietly beneath the story of progress. Skeletons from early farming communities show a sudden spike in tooth decay. More cavities, more abscesses, more bone infection near the jaw. The same species, the same biology, the same mouth, but a different diet. And suddenly, the body could not keep up. This wasn't a design flaw in human teeth. It was evidence that teeth were never built for what came next. There is a strange irony hiding in this. The moment humanity began storing food for the future was the same moment it began quietly destroying the past. The ancient balance between mouth and meal, sculpted over millions of years of evolution, undone within a few thousand. Evolution is slow. Culture is fast.
And when culture moves faster than biology can adapt, the body doesn't complain loudly. It corrodes quietly, tooth by tooth, generation by generation. You don't feel evolution losing, you just feel a toothache. There's a deeper layer here, one that goes beyond diet. The human mouth is not solitary. It is an ecosystem. Hundreds of species of bacteria, some protective, some destructive, existing in constant negotiation. In ancient humans, this microbial community lived in relative balance, shaped by a wide, varied, low-sugar diet.
Then something in 2013 surprised researchers studying ancient dental plaque preserved in calcified tartar. When they extracted and sequenced bacterial DNA from prehistoric teeth, they found something the modern mouth has almost entirely lost: diversity. A wide, resilient population of microbial species competing with each other, keeping any single harmful strain from taking over. Modern mouths, by contrast, are dominated by a narrow set of aggressive, acid-producing bacteria, species that thrive specifically on refined sugar, species that barely existed in significant numbers before agriculture and processed food gave them an advantage. In other words, human diet didn't just change what we eat, it changed who lives inside us. Pause on that for a moment. An invisible civilization exists inside every human mouth, and its population, its dominant species, its entire internal balance of power was rewritten, not by nature, but by what modern humans chose to swallow. You did not simply lose ancient dental habits, you inherited an ecosystem your ancestors would not recognize. There is another detail the skeletal record reveals, one that unsettles even seasoned researchers. Ancient human jaws were wider, teeth were straighter. Wisdom teeth in most prehistoric skulls erupted with enough room to grow properly, without crowding, without impaction, without the surgical extractions so common today. The reason has little to do with genetics, and much to do with mechanical use. Chewing tough, resistant food during childhood placed continuous pressure on developing jawbones, encouraging them to grow wider and stronger to meet the demand. Soft, processed modern diets remove that pressure almost entirely. The result is a skeleton adapting, in real time, to a world that no longer challenges it. Modern jaws are, in a very literal sense, underdeveloped, shaped not by nature, but by the absence of resistance. There is something quietly disturbing in that idea. The body doesn't just react to threats, it reacts to comfort. And comfort, extended long enough, can be its own kind of damage. None of this means ancient humans had perfect health. Their teeth show wear far beyond anything a modern mouth would tolerate. Flattened molars from grit and stone fragments in ground food, occasional abscesses from untreated infection, fractures from surviving on whatever the land offered that season. Life was harder. Death from infection was real. This isn't nostalgia for a lost paradise, it's something more precise than that. It's evidence that the human body evolved inside a very specific set of conditions: mechanical, microbial, nutritional, and that removing those conditions doesn't make the body safer, it makes it unprepared. Toothpaste in this light is not simply hygiene, it is compensation. A chemical patch applied twice daily to counteract a mismatch between an ancient biological system and a diet no ancient body was ever built to process. Fluoride hardens enamel against an acid attack that mostly didn't exist at this scale before agriculture. Antibacterial agents suppress bacterial populations that multiplied because of sugar humans introduced themselves. In a sense, modern dental care isn't protecting nature, it's correcting culture. And this pattern doesn't stay confined to teeth. It appears in eyesight, strained by artificial light and constant close-focus screens the eye never evolved to sustain for hours. It appears in posture, curved by chairs the spine never asked for. It appears in metabolism, disrupted by sugar densities the body has no ancient mechanism to regulate safely. Teeth are simply the most visible fossil of a much larger truth.
Human biology is still running software written for a different world, and every generation is left quietly patching the gaps with paste, with braces, with surgery, with medication, because the environment changed faster than the organism inside it. There is a strange kind of loneliness in that thought. You carry, inside your own skull, a body still calibrated for grasslands and firelight and raw, fibrous roots. A body that has no evolutionary memory of sugar in this concentration, of bread this soft, of a world this comfortable. It does not know how to metabolize ease. It only knows how to survive scarcity. And so every time a child spits mint foam into a sink, they are, without knowing it, repairing a rupture between what the body expects and what the century has provided. Maybe that is the real discovery buried in ancient teeth. Not that early humans were healthier, not that the past was better, but that health was never really a fixed state to protect. It was always a negotiation between an organism and its environment. And every environmental shift reopens that negotiation from scratch. Ancient humans didn't need toothpaste because they were never offered the conditions that would have made it necessary. Modern humans need it because comfort, convenience, and abundance, the very things civilization was built to deliver, turned out to be a kind of pressure the body had never been asked to withstand before. Somewhere in that irony is a quiet warning, one that reaches far beyond enamel and gum tissue. Every advance a species makes on its own behalf asks a question further down the line. Not whether the body can survive change, but whether it can survive comfort. The forest never asked that question. Civilization asks it every single day, in a small white sink, in the quiet seconds before the water runs clear.